Welcome back to the Plugged In La Porte podcast. I'm Nate Loucks, and today we're continuing our conversation with Dr. Sandra Wood, Superintendent of La Porte Community Schools. In this second part, we'll focus on La Porte Community School Corporation's vision for the future, including plans for Lincoln Elementary's transformation and how success will be measured moving forward. If you didn't get a chance to listen to our first part, I encourage you to do that before you listen to this so that we can kind of talk about, so you can listen anyway, to some of the things that led to these decisions from the school board. I want to thank the La Porte Economic Advancement Partnership. Their efforts to foster growth and development in La Porte can be further explored at laportepartnership.com. Please do us a favor and rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform. You not only boost our visibility, but also empower us to connect with a wider audience, ensuring the continuation of these critical conversations. We're excited to welcome back Dr. Sandra Wood to our discussion as we continue our conversation about education in La Porte. Dr. Wood, how are you today?
I'm doing great. Thank you.
Good. Now, last episode, we talked a little bit about some of the problems that led to this and some of your story, these kind of things. And we talked about some of the two primary issues. We've got a revenue issue and we've got an enrollment issue. And I'll even add a third issue, a building utilization problem, right? So let's talk a little bit about building utilization. You mentioned in our last episode that essentially the last 10 years, we've gone down 63 students a year in enrollment, which means then, if we're not adding kids, there's more space in all the buildings, correct?
Correct.
And do you see any schools, elementary, I mean, obviously we have one high school, one middle school, but any elementaries that is hitting that harder than others?
Yeah, so we obviously have this analyzed per building. So we, sort of have a master list of all of our buildings, and we can see what our current enrollment is, and then also what the building was built for. So the number of students that the building was built to house in classrooms. And so with that, then we can calculate each year a utilization rate and determine how well utilized each of our buildings is. So obviously, last spring, there was a lot of conversation about Kingsford Heights. So the reality is Kingsford Heights is our smallest elementary as far as enrollment, and it is also our lowest utilized school as well. And then from there, Lincoln is the second lowest in enrollment and the second lowest in utilization. So, obviously, conversation last spring focused on Kingsford Heights, simply due to the fact that it's
For our
smallest.
Listeners, before you were here, by the way.
Before I was here, correct. It was looked at that time because it's the smallest and it's the lowest utilized.
So there's a lot of community pushback on that one, particularly because two things are happening in Kingsford Heights, right? You've got a school that's kind of the center of a small community, right? It is the central social hub, the central education hub, and also Kingsford Heights, kind of a little bit of a pocket of its own out there in the southern part of the district. But also, as it was brought up, there are quite a few developments that are being built out there. So that are already being built. It's not projected. It is actually being built already. And there were some people that said, wait a second, the plan for growth in Kingsford Heights already there. Mm-hmm. So you decided the schools board, again, before you were taking over, decided not to do Kingsford Heights.
Correct.
Was that kind of why, just looking at all of those things, it's a kind of a pocket in the school?
Yeah, I think so. I think that at the end of the day, the geographic location of Kingsford Heights presents some challenges just because it is a community kind of separate from the rest of our district. So it is unique within our district in that it is its own town. It's its own little community, and it's several miles away from the rest of the city of La Porte. And so, with it being its own unique community in the way that it is, the school is the hub of that local community. And also there is a lot of development that's already happening there as well. So I think that was another piece that was considered. And this isn't, a subdivision with a few dozen homes. This is, anywhere from 200 to 400 homes that we're talking about potentially being incorporated into that area. So with knowing that there's potential for growth and knowing that geographically it's located further away from the rest of our district. If we have an influx of families that move into Kingsford Heights as a result of these new homes, we wouldn't want to put ourselves into a position where we're creating more challenges with transportation, more issues with moving those students then into other schools that, they're living far away from.
I want to talk a little bit about a topic that I as a parent, I don't know if I've ever fully gotten answered in a way that makes a lot of sense to me. So my daughter is a junior. She skipped her junior. She's a senior now, but should be a junior. And so she's 16, going to be 17 in March. And I think her class was the first class that, or maybe the class right below her, that did fifth grade at our intermediate school. And I remember when the case was made for this, we're going to take fifth graders away from the elementary and put them into the school. Again, listeners, Dr. Wood was not here. I'm not asking her why she did what she did. I'm asking maybe to help understand, our listeners can understand a little bit about this. The reasoning is we needed more room in our schools, in our elementary schools, maybe adding preschool, these kind of things. And then later we find out that we actually had room the whole time. I guess for me, and you don't even have to explain it, this is a decision that was made before you. I think, though, some of the kind of bedrock of distrust or mistrust right now is about some of these decisions that were made and not that long ago, right? We're talking 5, 6, 7 years ago that were told to us that the community supported and believed in, and then you find out that was never true in the beginning. Does that resonate with you? Is that how you kind of, like, again, you're coming into the situation.
Yeah.
This is not yours, but...
Right, yeah. And it's obviously hard for me to speak to the reason that things were done 6, 7 years ago because I wasn't here, and I don't want to make assumptions or, the reality is, that it isn't real clear from the things that were left exactly what the goal was in making that decision. So I have heard that exact comment made multiple times throughout this process, and that there is this level of distrust, and I completely understand that because, from looking at all pieces of this, it can be challenging to figure out exactly why decisions were made in the way that they were when we have other facts that are contradictory that were facts at the time that those decisions were made. So, again, it's hard for me to speak to that because I obviously wasn't here, but I fully understand and can empathize with the perspective that there was trust that was lost during that process as we're moving forward, and that's an underlying issue.
And that is one of the big things, right? So it's the trust, right? I think you were not a part of hurting the public perception of the trust of the school system, but now you are the leader of the school system, so you inherit that distrust and that mistrust. How do you as a leader then start building the trust, not only honestly with the public, but also with parents, with educators, I'm sure with staff, to build that trust again and say, just because it was this way, or just because maybe there's some decisions that confused you, or maybe you didn't even like and you didn't understand, doesn't mean it will be that way in the future.
That's certainly one of my biggest challenges right now, and unfortunately, moving into this position and sort of being tasked with these difficult decisions right away, upon me coming here, is an additional barrier because I haven't had time to build trust. The reality is, I came into this position fully knowing that this was an immediate issue that had to be dealt with sooner rather than later. It was obviously attempted to, a resolution was attempted last spring with Kingsford Heights. That ended up not going through. The problem didn't go away. I knew that coming into the position. It was part of my interview.
So the school board knew that this was a part of, So the school board knew whoever they're hiring is going to have to tackle this issue quickly.
Yes, absolutely. And then it was became even more of an immediate need when our current enrollment for this school year came in significantly lower than we anticipated. So, we had anticipated a smaller decline. And the decline that we had at the start of the school year was, I think like 5 times what we had expected.
Whoa. So we're averaging 60, roughly 63, I think you said. And what was last year's?
So we had a demographic study was done last spring, and it gives us a projection. It obviously gives us analysis of the past, our demographic data from the past, but it also gives us a projection out for the next coming decade. And so when that study was done last spring, they expected that our enrollment for this year was going to be 8 fewer students than it was last year.
So significantly less than what the trend was.
Correct. When we got here and actually got to school and got all the students in the chairs,
started counting the heads,
and we report to the state on October 1st. So when that number got reported to the state October 1st, we were 51 students fewer.
Wow.
So definitely a lower number than we had anticipated, but in line with the trend.
It wasn't outlandish to where it's been the last 10 years.
No, it isn't. It's not an outlying number or something. Where did that come from? Obviously this has been the trend for a number of years. I wasn't here to be part of the demographic study, so I don't know where they got that it was going to be 8, but that's what it said, and that's what we were kind of utilizing as far as our budgeting. And then, one of the challenges for schools is that we have to prepare our budget in July and August, and we don't find out how many students we have until October.
That's a weird system.
So it's a very weird system. So we're guessing in, the end of the summer, and then in the fall is when we find out how many we actually have. So that compounded the problem. So coming into this, position, I knew that the enrollment issue was real. I knew that the revenue issue was real. And then we got here and got to our October 1st count date, and we found out that this is even more significant than we expected. And so we are not in a position to wait and see. And so, ideally, in a perfect world, I would have loved to have been able to spend this entire year just getting acclimated with the school district, getting to know people, and doing listening and learning, and then move forward with solutions or with plans the following year. But unfortunately, we are not in a position that we can continue to wait and see, because we have to ensure that our corporation is financially and fiscally responsible.
So the decision was made not long ago, for our listeners, if you follow the news or maybe you were at the meeting, that Lincoln Elementary School would be repurposed. It's not going to be sold. It's not going to be closed, but it will no longer be an elementary school. You're going to repurpose that building. Can you first explain why you decided Lincoln?
Sure. So, like I said, obviously coming into this position, I knew that this was going to be a problem to be dealt with. And so, when I came into the position, I really wanted to commit to 2 things. If we have to go through this difficult thing, I wanted to commit to two pieces as part of the outcome. First being that if there was a way to do this that we could add value, as well as having to go through this difficult downsizing, so to speak, process, if we can do so in a way that also adds value to our district so that we receive some benefit long-term from the process, then that was the path that I wanted to take. And then the second piece was also that if we know that we have to make this decision, we're not going to wait until the spring. We're going to do this early so that we can prepare our stakeholders and provide as much time for transition planning as possible. So going back to that first piece and the concept of adding value, obviously one of the first things that I looked at was the attempt last spring to close Kingsford Heights. There wouldn't have been much of a way to add value through a closure of Kingsford Heights. So geographically, it wouldn't make sense to utilize that building for any other purpose. It's too far away from the rest of our district. And so if that building were to have closed, we essentially would have done just that. It would have been shuttered up. So it would have been closed. We would have thrown mothballs in, walked away, and that would have been the end of the building. I wanted to move forward in a way that if we have to downsize and go from 8 elementaries to 7, can we do that in a way that we can utilize the space for something else that we don't currently have? And so then after looking at Kingsford Heights and realizing that there's not much in terms of value add with that building, then our second lowest utilized and our second smallest enrollment school is Lincoln Elementary. Lincoln is very centrally located in the city of La Porte, and it is within 1.2 miles of 3 other elementary schools. So when we look at that for impact, obviously we want to also do this with as minimal of an impact across the board as possible. The students that currently attend Lincoln Elementary can be redistricted within those 3 schools, and we can do that in a way that is going to be very minimal as far as the logistics of getting those students districted to another building. So,
and I know I've asked you this before, but and that means you're not going to go from class sizes, let's say at Heilman, from 22 to 40 or something like that,
No.
right? You're not planning on doing any of that.
Correct.
Where
Yep.
it's really going to be an adverse effect on a child's education.
Right. We've looked at all of the numbers and we're looking at doing this in a way, and a lot of these logistical things have not been determined at this point, but that's one of the top priorities is when we're looking at redistricting the students within the Lincoln boundary, we want to make sure we're doing so in a way that doesn't create additional challenges for transportation and also is not going to cause us to overcrowd any classrooms. And our class sizes in many of our elementary buildings are lower than what we would consider the threshold to be for, a appropriate or maximum even class size.
So the decision then was made, we're going to close Lincoln or repurpose Lincoln, close it as elementary school, but reopen and repurpose and evolves the purpose into what?
So one of the things that has come up as I've started in this position that I've heard multiple times was that families are having a challenge with early childhood programs, specifically preschool in our district. And I'd been reached out to by a number of families that had asked if there's a possibility for an all-day preschool. Because right now we offer a half-day preschool program. So parents are either having to pick up their child at 10:30 at the end of the morning session of preschool, or they're having to bring their child to an afternoon session at noon. And so if you are a working family and both parents have jobs, there isn't opportunity for you to do that. And so when we set up a preschool in this way with these half-day programs, what we're doing is essentially making it inaccessible for a large portion of our community. So families that otherwise may have enrolled students in preschool are having to utilize just childcare or daycare programs that may not have that educational component with it. Mm-hmm. And so our plan then is to repurpose Lincoln into an early childhood center that will serve students throughout all of the La Porte Community School District and provide an opportunity for a preschool section followed by, or vice versa, childcare. So a built-in daycare component to work in conjunction with the preschool. So families will be able to access academic programming for students. We also believe that we'll be able to offer this for 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds, where right now we're only servicing 4-year-olds for preschool. So being able to drop their child off for preschool, stay for lunch and have a snack, and then daycare until the parent is able to pick them up at the end of their workday.
Yeah, so I hear a lot of, I've read at least some of the pushback on this is, can 3 and 4-year-olds be in a chair the whole time, and can they be in it? But the idea is not just to be in a classroom, right?
Correct.
To actually have age-appropriate education
Yes.
and childcare, these kind of things. It's a hybrid model, correct?
Right.
So we have current preschool in a couple other schools. I know Riley has it. I think Critchfield has it. I don't know which one of our South counties, if Kingsford Heights has it or not.
They do.
But you're moving this into a centralized location. What do you say to parents who are in Kingsford Heights or at Critchfield that say, wow, you're making my preschool 3 or 4 miles or 5 or 10 miles even, Kingsford Heights, further away?
Yeah. So that's one of our concerns is that, our goal with creating an early childhood center is to provide more accessibility to preschool for families. So certainly what we don't want to do is inadvertently make it less accessible to families that right now are managing the transportation in the middle of the day, but maybe would have a challenge with it now being located in central La Porte as opposed to in some of those outlying communities. So we are going to be forming a committee that's going to be reviewing all of these things, and we're going to look at our options for being able to offer the centralized program that would have the daycare component with it. But if there is a need in those school communities to also have a preschool session offered in those schools, we're going to look at seeing feasibly if we can do that as well. Obviously we have to look logistically. We need to ensure that staffing wise and from a budgetary standpoint, we can manage all of that. But we are going to be considering kind of a hybrid model to where parents would have the option to utilize programs in those geographically, the schools that are more geographically on the fringe of our district as opposed to the ones that are right in the center.
This brings up another question for me, because these are big decisions, right? These are certainly significant evolutions of how early education will be done, but also just repurposing buildings. And we're going to talk a little bit more about CTE, these kind of things. How do you as a leader, how do you determine what is successful and what is not? Because I feel like if we as leaders aren't consistently asking, is this working, right? And we're just doing it without cause or concern for, is it meeting the goals that we have, then it's only going to hurt our community, right? So how do you as a leader determine what is successful and what is not?
I think that involves a lot of revisiting, a lot of listening, and continuing to focus on our strategic priorities as we're moving forward. So the concept of the Early Childhood Center is actually something that was part of our strategic plan. So before I was here, the district went through a strategic planning process that involved focus groups and surveys and a variety of different input areas that all came together to identify where the district needs to go in the future to meet the needs of the community. And so the Early Childhood Center was a part of that. So, continuing to move through a strategic planning process, once the goals are set, you can't just stop there and say, okay, we set a goal, we achieved it, now we're done. It has to be a continual feedback loop so that you're continuing to gather information. And obviously, as educators, we use things like test scores and discipline reports and progress reports from teachers and things like that. So we utilize all of those things, but we also have to continually engage the community as well, and our staff. So continuing to bring the community back in, asking those questions, and being willing to admit if something doesn't work so that we can revamp and refocus. And, that's, of course, one of the challenges is that nobody has a crystal ball. We can't necessarily always predict exactly what's going to work, but we have to be willing to admit when it doesn't and then pivot so that we ensure that we're continually moving towards success.
And not be afraid of the answers, right? If it's not working, let's not be afraid of saying it's not working. Let's figure it out. The state of Indiana has a couple broad issues going on with state education. Two of them I want to talk a little bit about. So firstly, the Indiana Chamber of Commerce has said we are not sending enough kids to college, right? Not even in 10 years. I think it was a 7-year difference. The amount of kids we're sending to college has dropped from, I want to say, don't quote me, but it was like 65% down to 52% in a very short amount of time. And so they've kind of sounded the alarm on that. But they've also sounded the alarm on career and technical education, which is maybe the trades or just learning a skill that can help our community be employed, but also help a student make money, these kind of things. You've got both of those things, which means to me that we've got this segment of kids that are graduating that aren't going to college. They're not going to career and technical education. They're just kind of existing, right? You've got this former Boston Middle School, and I've heard that one of the things that you want to do and the school board wants to do, and part of the vision is revamp and kind of re-envision how career and technical education is done in La Porte. Explain a little bit for our listeners what that means and what ideas you have.
Sure. So this is kind of wrapped in together with, we talked about the value add. So for, those who are familiar, right now the Boston building is largely utilized for our special ed programming and our Little Learners preschool. So We have 7 classrooms of preschool right now that are in the Boston building. And so one of the opportunities that we have throughout this process of repurposing Lincoln and moving all of our preschool programming into that building is that those 7 classrooms of preschool that currently are at Boston can move into that space. And so last spring, our school board designated the Boston building as a CTE center, so Career and Technical Education Center. And that was done in conjunction with conversations with community leaders, conversations with the city of La Porte, with LEAP, and the need for our school to be an active participant in growing the workforce within the city of La Porte. So it had been a conversation, I believe, that had been taking place over a number of years, and finally they were in a spot to where they were able to put the dedication on paper and say, yes, we are using this building for the purpose of career and technical education. And so as we move through all of these changes, we now have the opportunity to really open this building up to be able to be fully utilized, for this purpose. So we had started this year with one program, so welding. So before I came in, there was a grant that was available that allowed us to build a welding lab.
At the former Boston?
At the former Boston building. So it's the old wrestling gym, I think, is what we utilized for that. So we have 16 welding stations now, and so we have a number of kids that are enrolled in that class, more that are interested and that will be coming up through the years to take this course. And it's working in partnership with New York Blower and with other community partners that are engaging directly with the instructor in a way that is allowing the instructor to kind of gear the classroom content specifically to the needs of that community partner. So with the ability for the instructor to be talking directly with our industry leaders, what is it that you're looking for when students graduate from this program? Obviously, we want them to be certified as welders when they graduate, but also what are the soft skills that they need? What is it that our employers are expecting our kids to have when they walk through the door? The other opportunity it creates is that students are engaging with community partners and with industry partners right in our community so that they're familiar with the facility. They're familiar with some of the individuals in management that work there. They will be more comfortable if they go into an interview because they just have familiarity. So the goal being that we're kind of creating a direct pipeline to be able to support the industry right within our community. So we started with welding, had goals to be able to expand with a few other programs, but kind of had to put those on the back burner because we just didn't have space this year. So as we are able to move the preschool out of the area, we know that next year we're going to be able to add in a health careers program, which is going to provide CNA licensure for students to be certified as a certified nurse assistant when they graduate. Looking to work in partnership with some of our healthcare partners with that program as well, and then building trades as well. So and they're in the process of working to find a builder that is going to work with our students to provide them on-the-job, hands-on training as they actually build a home in the community. So
then the goal is once these students are graduated, they can start contributing and hopefully making their own money, right?
Correct.
For those kids that don't want to go to college or they're not sure what they want to do, it could be a perfect kind of entry and a perfect next place for them to do that. What about the kids, though? The state says we're not sending enough kids to college. What can we do locally to make sure that the kids that want to go to college at La Porte School Corporation are going?
So we offer a lot of dual credit courses currently that our seniors and sometimes juniors can participate in those. With dual credit classes and with concurrent enrollment classes for our university, our college-bound students, sometimes we have obstacles with those programs because university and the Higher Ed Commission requires certain certification for teachers to be able to teach those classes. And as that evolves and as there are different parameters that are set with that, our goal is to also be able to provide a similar opportunity to our students that are college bound as well, so that if we have the space in the Boston building that we can set up an online learning opportunity for students to be able to engage in online college courses their senior year, and where maybe they are able to work directly with a counselor that supports them through that process, because online courses can be tough. Not every person can learn in an online manner. So being able to provide supports to those students when we can pull in some online opportunities for them to be able to work on dual credit opportunities. And we're also looking to see, is there a university partner that would also work with us as we are expanding some of our CTE programs, and a lot of these programs work in conjunction with licensure. We'll be talking to higher ed partners to work on that. And then as we are bringing them in for that area, can they also provide an opportunity for our students to maybe take some of the prerequisite college courses that might be needed as they move on into whatever university they choose to go to.
I want to talk a little bit in our time left about, we talked in the first episode about the evolution of education just in the state as a whole, in that with open enrollment, it has created a marketplace for education. It's going to the supermarket and looking at which type of peanut butter you want and then buying that, right? And saying, that's the one I want. And I'm going to send my kids there and I'm going to do how, whereas before, you didn't necessarily have to worry about marketing because you went to the place that you were geographically located. And if you didn't like that school, maybe you sent your kids to private school or something. But by and large, you went to the place that you were geographically located, where your neighbors went, where your neighbors' kids went, all these kind of things. That's not going to be the way education is done in Indiana for the foreseeable future. How valuable is marketing, right? Because, again, and this is such a delicate conversation, because you don't want to talk about New Prairie or Westville or Michigan City as competitors, but by the nature of education in Indiana, they kind of are, right? Yep. Not bad people, not bad school systems, but you are competing for the same students. So what do we do as a school system to help marketing what we do so that we can reverse that trend, but also maybe start adding some more kids?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it's hugely important for us to be thinking about everything we do in terms of marketing right now, because like you said, whether we like it or not, this is the reality of the education system in Indiana, is that we are all fighting essentially for the same kids. And so the best thing that we can do is highlight the things that we have. And so we have to get better at telling our story, and we have to get better at putting ourselves out there in a way that we're able to attract families to La Porte because they see that we are offering things that other places aren't. And that is the reality. So, that's one of the opportunities we have, just being a larger school district. We are the biggest in La Porte County. So having the largest structure of education in La Porte County provides us with more opportunities that we can offer to families. We haven't done a great job about talking about those things and highlighting them. And so that's going to be a huge emphasis for us moving forward, is that we are going to get better at telling our story and to work on some intentional marketing for those things. But we want to be able to leverage ourselves in a way that we're showcasing through the work that we're doing, that we have something for everyone. We have programs that will promote and provide opportunity for success for all students, whether they're the college-bound students, whether they are the students that are going to, move into competitive high-wage jobs through career and technical education certification and those types of things. So, we have to focus on our ability to really highlight the great things that we already have happening, and then amplify the opportunities that we have to bring more students here.
But I kind of abide by this rule that you get what you pay for,
Mm-hmm.
which means then the marketing budget has to be increased, and the ways in which we do marketing, because marketing doesn't just happen, right? You have to have people that do it. You have to figure out what your story is to tell, all of these kind of things. So it's an interesting thing when you're talking about budget restraints and budget, but also the investments that need to go to reverse a trend.
Right.
So, so I guess my final question for you is there anything in these last two episodes that we didn't address that you want our listeners to know? We talked about a lot, I know.
Yeah, so I think the only thing that I would add is, we are going through a difficult process right now, obviously. with the decommissioning of an elementary school. This is a tough spot to be in. It's not a place that we want to be here. We don't want to have to do this. But the reality is that we have to look at this as moving our district forward comprehensively for the district as a whole. We have to be cognizant of our resources, and we have to ensure that we are aligning what we have to what we need. And it's unfortunate that we're in the spot that we're in. I'm very empathetic to the families that will be affected by this, the staff that will be affected by this. But I hope that through the process of the grief that's associated with losing an elementary school, that ultimately we are able to come forward in a way that we've added value, and that we're doing this in a way that provides us ample time to prepare, to transition kids, to work through all of the questions that are going to come up as we go through this process. Hopefully doing so with 9 months ahead of us as we have ample time to prepare for the start of next school year. We'll be able to address all of the things to make everyone as comfortable with this process and with this decision as we can, and ultimately we move our district forward in a positive way.
Yeah, I think I whenever people are upset, I think it's absolutely right to validate their concerns, to validate, especially after the season that this community has gone through, and to say it is absolutely fine to feel the way you do. I hope people don't give up, though, because where we got to didn't happen overnight, and fixing it won't happen overnight either. But unless we do, as a community, as leaders, as a school system, some drastic things to just kind of pivot from where we were, then we will only get the same results in the future, right? And so hopefully that'll happen, and we are hoping for the best for you and for our school system, for our leaders. We here at LEAP believe in our educators and our parents, and this pain that we're going through is tangible. It is felt, but I genuinely believe it will not be for nothing. I think we will come out of this as a better community. So
I think so too.
All right. I want to thank you again for listening to this episode. Thanks for joining us for this 2-part conversation with Dr. Sandra Wood about the future of education in La Porte. These discussions about our children's future are vital to our community's growth and success. Again, special thanks to our sponsor, the La Porte Economic Advancement Partnership. The Plugged In La Porte podcast was produced and edited by Lindsay Kneifel. I'm still your host, Nate Loucks, and it's been an honor to have this conversation with you. Please rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform, and remember to stay curious, stay connected, and stay plugged in to all things La Porte. Bye-bye.